Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again. Rational perspective on Chelsea's first game of the 2022-23 season. Everton 0, Chelsea 1. It took about 100 minutes, over 100 minutes, but Chelsea have ended the Goodison Park curse, at least for now. Unconvincing, but we had some good performances. I think we had some good flashes. We had some good cameos from new signings. And in the end, getting the job done at a ground where Chelsea have found it so difficult to get a result for so long. There were a lot of things in that game that were very reminiscent of the last time we went to Goodison Park in April. An inability to break down low blocks, the aggression of Everton. Chelsea not really dealing with that very well, individual mistakes. But then we actually look at some of the performances, and as I say, Chelsea just about getting over the line. I think it was so key. Chelsea got points on the board on the first weekend. As I say, winning at that ground for the first time in years. I think for Tuchel as well to lift the mood, even if it's not a glorious performance and we want to see a bit more. I think there was enough there to get your sort of teeth into and kind of feel that there are things to work on, things to improve, and things we can build on in the coming weeks. I think it was interesting looking at the team. I said this in yesterday's video. It was a pretty easy team considering it was the opening night of the season to predict. The only big discussion point was the left wing back. I put Cucurella there. Instead, it was Ben Chilwell. It was the other way around. And that became very influential in the game, actually. The decision to start Ben Chilwell for Chelsea. There was no Timo Werner in the squad. There was no Callum Hudson-Odoi in the squad. There was no Marcos Alonso in the squad. Particularly on the last two there, Werner and Marcos Alonso, I think it is very telling in terms of their futures. But I like the fact that we're seeing players that you think are going to have a bigger future at Chelsea, and that makes a lot of sense now. The serious stuff is kicking in. My concern with that first half was just similar things from last year, an inability to create good chances against teams who sit deep. Chelsea, I think, were overwhelmed at points, and it came down to the defensive quality of Thiago Silva and Kalidou Koulibaly, who I felt had a brilliant debut. He really did, despite going off injured, or at least with cramp late on. To really put in late challenges or blocks, or Edouard Mendy, who got a little bit of flack over pre-season for some of his decision-making, goalkeeping, I think had a good night. He made a good save from Tarkowski in the first half. He made a good block in the second half as well. So it was living on the edge, and you could very much feel like the first goal in this game was going to be so crucial, because Frank had very much just gone with the same tactics again. I think looking to be direct, looking to hit on the counter, despite the fact they didn't have a natural striker. And for Chelsea, it was about remaining patient. It was about remaining calm. But it still felt like, to me, and this is something that Tuchel is going to have to improve this season, it was far too reliant on individual quality for a large majority of that first half. And for a large majority of the game, Raheem Sterling, I think, looked very good in that first half. He really did. And on two occasions, the offside, which is a bit of a shame, but also the block from Mikalenko, I think it was, in the second half as well. A nice link up with Cucurella there. You see the quality of Raheem Sterling. You see small things like his ability to sort of barge off bigger players. Again, low centre of gravity we haven't had from a player like Sterling since, of course, Eden Hazard. And just, I like the role he's playing. I really do. I think that kind of free role behind two other players, I think it works maybe a little bit better with Mount and Havertz, but I think there's a lot to go off there, and it hopefully will get Sterling into a lot of really good goal-scoring positions for Chelsea in the coming weeks, as it did against Udinese. Unfortunately, no goal tonight, but I'm highly encouraged by that. I think that Sterling was once again looking like a very sharp, very bright player who's going to have a lot of influence over Chelsea's season. But the goal, let's get to the goal, the winning goal of the game, the main highlight. It's no coincidence to me that the moment Chelsea get one of Ben Chilwell or Reece James inside the box in a dangerous area, something happens. Because up until that point, I think Everton had done a really good job keeping Reece and Ben far away from the box, in areas where they weren't going to be as devastating. Even when Reece put in a few crosses, his crossing wasn't that good tonight. Particularly set-piece delivery was quite poor tonight, I felt, from Reece on corners as well. But that ball from Koulibaly as well, really nice pull into that sort of it's not inverted, but sort of inside position that Chilwell became accustomed to before that injury. And he first touch is brilliant. He gets himself into the box, and Decore, who'd been having a good game, just panics. A classic panic situation. We get the penalty. Jorginho, the man himself again, is he going to end as Chelsea's top goal scorer? Gets himself off the mark with a perfect penalty that even if Pickford goes the right way, he ain't saving that. I thought it was really good that, Chelsea and, especially Jorginho didn't rise to the challenge of Yerry Mina trying to get into his head. Perfect at the end of a long first half. Chelsea end 1-0 up. But the second half didn't really reflect the game I think a lot of us hoped we'd maybe see in that second period, where you're hoping that Chelsea, with that goal so key, the game opens up a bit. We feel a little bit more confident. Everton themselves doubt their sort of game plan because it was so reliant on keeping Chelsea at bay like it was in April, and then hoping to feed off mistakes. Very much Everton were the stronger team, I think, in the second half, or at least for the opening period of the second half. There were large stretches of this game where it looked like both teams were still finding their feet in this season, and looked, in the last 10 to 15 minutes, it looked like a lot of players were out on their feet, to be honest, in my opinion. It didn't quite look like both teams had another gear to go up in, which in the end I think helped Chelsea in this situation with the goal they had. Key performers, man of the match, Thiago Silva. Not groundbreaking analysis. There was a lot about that first half that reminded me of last season, but a nice thing rather than a negative thing that reminded me of last season was the brilliance, the expertise, the cool head of Thiago Silva, who at times was losing his head, frustrated with his teammates, but all round, just once again, he may not be the fastest, but the ability up here is so much faster than a majority of defenders. The block from Demarai Gray's one-on-one position, I saw someone tweet, you think that Thiago Silva is, at his age in that situation, is a nightmare. But the way he doesn't rush, he waits, and then he makes the block that saves Chelsea. And time and again, as we've seen from Thiago, just right place, right time, cool head, the block being their first time. The amount of times you could go back and watch that game, and it's always Thiago either instructing someone else or being first to it to clear it out of danger. Just brilliant. And it was nice to see that alongside him was Koulibaly, who from Anthony Gordon in the first half, expert tackle. In the second half, again, just I felt like he himself in what was, listen, this is a very experienced defender, but Goodison Park historically is a confrontational environment. It's a direct environment. If any new defender is maybe going to come a little bit unstuck or surprised by a new league, you'd think Goodison Park for Chelsea is kind of one of those grounds. But I felt Koulibaly asserted himself quite well, looks very composed and made key tackles over the game. So again, I think all of the new signings looked encouraging to me. You got Raheem Sterling looking bright, looking influential. You've got Koulibaly as well. And then Marc Cucurella coming off the bench, nearly linking up with Sterling for a goal. So I felt that he looked sharp as well, despite he didn't get all of the minutes maybe he wanted. So there is encouragement, I think, with the new players coming in. Not as much encouragement with some of the players who have been here a little bit longer. I felt neither Mason Mount nor Kai Havertz really asserted themselves in the way you'd expect them to. Armando Broja, I think, would be licking his lips after that performance, because as I said, I think before the season I've written about, it's with Kai, it's another game where I felt like he got physically bossed out of it. And Mason, despite in the early period maybe looking like he was going to get on the ball, I think Frank very quickly shut him down again, and he wasn't able to influence things. And it was a little bit surprised that Mount came off first, but listen, both of them didn't have the influence we'd hoped they would have had. And Reece James as well, I think, is still looking a little bit sluggish, trying to come back into maybe his best fitness and form. And Ben Chilwell obviously had that big moment. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from N'Golo Kante. They just felt for me in that second half, Chelsea again with the handbrake on, just not wanting to commit too many bodies forward in fear we get hit on the counter. And that was a bit frustrating because I think at times it was kind of allowing pressure onto Chelsea, which Everton, of course, didn't capitalise on. But, you fear against a better team in that situation. When Chelsea have got better quality, and this is something that Tuchel really needs to work on, Chelsea need to go for these games a lot more. I think just hanging on for 1-0. And you hope with fitness, with intensity, with the introduction of players like Marc Cucurella, Armando Broja, Conor Gallagher came on very late for his full Chelsea debut. All of these things can hopefully increase the intensity or refresh things as the season goes on with those 5 subs. There isn't much else to speak about, to be honest. It wasn't the most event-filled game. I think this might be last on Match of the Day, at least tonight, because I think it was a pretty dull affair for neutrals. But in the case of Chelsea, I think symbolically for the new season starting, you're getting at least 3 points on the board. I think that for Tuchel, it's quite important to sort of redemption after that defeat back in April. Ending the hoodoo which is another one that Tuchel can add to the list now. Since 2017 or 2014, he's had a lot of these. It's finally Goodison Park. He's got the win, and hopefully that starts a trend now of us winning at Goodison Park. But we move on next week, of course, a full week now to prepare, over a week now to prepare for Spurs, which is going to be another test at Stamford Bridge, because they, looked very good against, obviously, Southampton today. That's a different quality of game, but, in other ways, a different test, because, Spurs, you'd think, maybe would offer Chelsea more space, as it's a bigger game against a higher quality opposition. Let me know your feelings. Let me know your man of the match. I think most people have Thiago Silva. I'd be a little bit surprised if people didn't. What did you think about Raheem Sterling, Cucurella, Koulibaly? What do you think about Tuchel's tactics? How do you think the team has worked out? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.